family and friends. Yeah.
All right. So welcome everyone to our July version of Nebraska Nature Nerd Night. Tonight we're going to be talking about some fossils and paleontology, and we're going to be talking here with Shane Tucker. We'll get started here like we normally do. If you joined a Nature Nerd Night before, great. If you haven't, you're in for a treat.
Really nerdy.
Really nerdy.
We set the tone. Are you ready?
All right, we are ready.
If you're a nature-loving science nerd, we think that you just might be happy like us to start Nebraska Nature Nerd Night. Bird, bees, parasites, snakes, and fossils too. If you're a curious brainiac, we got a show for you.
Oh my gosh, Amber, that's so nerdy. Every time we do it, it gets more nerdy. Yeah.
It never gets old. But hey, Shane's smiling, so
well, it's good.
He's probably embarrassed for us. It's fine. We're excited.
It's okay. Well, again, welcome everyone to our Nebraska Nature Nerd Night. This is our fourth installment of Nebraska Nature Nerd Night. So tonight we're going to be talking with Shane Tucker, who is a highway paleontologist with the University of Nebraska State Museum and the Nebraska Department of Roads. And you guys are definitely in for a treat tonight. We're very excited to have this on. We're going to quickly go over some kind of expectations and what we're doing tonight. And then we're going to kind of hand it over to Shane because you guys don't want to hear from us. You want to hear from him. So
Exactly.
we're going to share our screen here really quickly with all of you. Okay. All right. So really quickly, we're going to just kind of go over some things here. Like I said, tonight, our title is Life in the Past Lane, Discovering Nebraska's Prehistoric Creatures. So that's what we're going to kind of go over tonight. Again, if you've joined us before, great. Thanks for coming back. If you haven't, welcome. Just letting everybody know you are welcome to use the chat function if you have any questions or really cool comments about what kind of Shane is talking about. But just remember to keep it on topic and keep it clean and appropriate. Otherwise, we do have the right to remove you. But I'm sure we won't have an issue at all. I don't want to share that yet because I want Shane to talk about that.
Oh, just haven't shared yet.
All right. So we're, like I said, we're going to do some questions here. We're going to talk with Shane. It's going to be kind of just a fun, informal chat.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I feel like we already have like a bunch of potentially fossil nerds here with us in the audience tonight, so it's going to be a good night.
Yeah, I'm very excited. Lots of good questions.
It's like we're gonna, are we gonna travel back in time, Shane? Like, are you gonna help with this and like show us? Okay.
We're going to travel back in time. We could do a whole semester long travel back in time to talk about.
Did you do that, but like just cram it into this hour?
We're going to cram it into an hour.
Okay.
We're gonna skip some of the boring stuff. We'll just hit all the exciting things.
Yeah, that's what we want to do tonight. I had the coolest opportunity a few years ago to be able to teach a paleontology summer camp out in western Nebraska, and I got to work with this cool dude, and it was so fun. And we had kids literally like discovering fossils. And was their name on those fossils now? Didn't you say like the kids' names were on those fossil records?
Oh yeah. So in the museum collection where I am tonight, all those fossils came back here. They were cleaned off. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a little while. And then, all the kids that participated have their names on the label that they discovered it. So it was a lot of fun.
The history of science. That's pretty cool. Isn't that neat?
That's really cool.
So speaking of that in particular, getting kids and getting everyone excited about paleontology and fossils, what is your story, Shane? I know we introduced you as a highway paleontologist. That's where you are now. But what do you have any like exciting memory or a origin story for how you became a prehistoric creature nerd or a fossil nerd?
Yeah, so I grew up in York, Nebraska, and so always we came down to the University of Nebraska State Museum or Memorial Hall, whatever you want to call it, a lot as a kid on field trips. And as a kid, we went camping and fishing quite a bit as a family. Went to a lot of the state recreation areas, and when the fish weren't biting, you'd go explore and see what was out there. And actually, one of the first memories I have of fossils is we're down by Alexandria at the state recreation area, and on the shore, there's this rock here. It's a limestone and has a bunch of clamshells in it. And I, at the time, had no idea how old that was. I just knew that those clams were probably really, really old because the rock was hard, and they're all over on the shoreline. So I didn't pick any up and bring them home. But I later found when I came up to school here at the university to study geology that That layer of rock was called the Greenhorn limestone, and it was somewhere roughly 92 million years old. And those were shells.
How old were you when you found it?
Probably like 5, 4,
Wow.
4
Oh,
or 5,
There's
6.
like this
somewhere in that
epiphany moment, huh? Like,
So it was cool, and then from that point on, if you're out fishing, camping, picking up rocks. So I knew geology was what I wanted to do. I knew paleontology was exciting. And then as, I got a little bit older into high school, our family went on vacations. We'd go visit natural history museums. We went to Ashfall Fossil Beds, which is a partnership between Game and Parks and the University of Nebraska State Museum. And I'll have you guys show that first slide. And once you see this is the most amazing fossil site there is. And I would argue that this could be the best fossil site anywhere in the world. And here you have all these rhinoceros that had died as a result of this super volcanic eruption over 1,000 miles away. The ash drifted way out here to where Nebraska is today from the Yellowstone hotspot. And basically all these animals died because of that. And once I saw that, I was like, I definitely want to go study that. I came down here to the University of Nebraska, studied with Mike Voorhees, and when I was a sophomore in college, I got an opportunity to be an intern up there to excavate rhinos. And so then I got a job at the museum as a student while I was an undergraduate, and went through that, did a graduate program here, working in the museum as well through the geology department, and then had an opportunity to become part of the Highway Paleontology program.
what is so cool about his story, I feel, is like one of the sparks that got him into this field was literally this site and Morrill Hall, and now he works there. Like,
Yeah.
what an amazing story that is.
Also, who knew there were rhinos in Nebraska? Like, I mean, I knew, but like, that's cool.
Yeah,
Nebraska has such a diverse, wildlife. We'll touch on it and some of the other
Okay.
animals. I won't get into it here
I
because
can't believe I haven't.
we'll get off cue here.
We need to go trip. Maybe for work, like we need to go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, for me.
That's so cool. So you're a paleontologist, but specifically you're a highway paleontologist, which I thought when I first saw that title, I thought that was kind of interesting. Like, are there bridge paleontologists or building paleontologists, or what's the significance of the highway part, and also just kind of what does a paleontologist do, just in case?
Yeah, so a paleontologist studies ancient life, and for me, I study ancient mammals. But occasionally we'll bump into other things because with highway construction, wherever it goes in the state, we have fossils from 90 of the 93 Nebraska counties. So whenever you disrupt the soil, there's a chance fossils will be uncovered. So each summer we go around monitoring the highway construction projects, looking for fossils, going behind some of the equipment, looking for things, and seeing what we can find. Now, fragile fossils and heavy machinery seems like a horrible combination, but many times if you locate where the fossils are at, you can shift the people away. We never stop the construction project, and then you can sit down and dig and get the fossils removed from the ground safely and then brought back to the museum's collection. So it's a partnership between the University of Nebraska State Museum and Nebraska Department of Transportation.
Cool.
That goes back, there's origins of it back to 1937, where they talk about when they're building roads, that if fossils are encountered, the project needs to stop and somebody needs to be consulted. But it's really for the formal, where the legislation came in since 1960. So 60 years now that we've been working with the roads department, collected over 250,000 fossils from over 150 sites all across the state through the program. Yeah, going all the way from fossils that might be as old as 320 million years old, all the way up to things that were several thousands of years old, which technically aren't fossils, but we have those as well. So it's a great program, and there's only 2 states in the country that have a full-time highway paleontology program, us in Colorado. Everybody has to deal with it. Most of the time they wait till something's uncovered and they see it. We're kind of a little bit more proactive.
You're like proactive.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a novel idea. I've never.
So it's a great program, and lots of great science that's resulted from it. Many new species. We just had a scientist from China that we found a specimen back in the 90s, described a new species of archaic bear from that particular site. So
in Nebraska?
In Nebraska, yeah.
Oh, wow.
That is
So,
cool.
so when you were talking about, it's this old, so it's a fossil, but then you said, well, technically it's not a fossil. How do you distinguish what's a fossil and what's not a fossil?
Yeah, so I mean, it's some evidence of ancient life is what a fossil is, but we put this arbitrary date of 10,000 years. It must be 10,000 years to be a fossil. And so if it's like 8,000 years old, we call it a subfossil. It's basically the living species in many instances, like with bison still around, that we see in those situations. But I mean, it's still very old. It's significant. It's been in the earth. It defied the odds of actually being there for thousands or millions of years. Far less than 1% of all animal life is preserved as fossils. Usually there's so many things that could happen. It could sit on the surface, the sun could destroy it, it could freeze, thaw, break
I
it
was gonna
up.
say, what does that process look like if to become that fossil?
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
very,
and it's really rare occasion. So what does that look like in a kind of simplistic term?
yeah. So for it to be a fossil, if you're in an area where there's high rates of sedimentation, so like on a floodplain where you have frequent floods and the sand washes out of the banks or the muds, it'll bury it quickly. If it's underground quickly, the chances are better. The animals won't eat it, but then you always have to worry about the plant roots going through and breaking it up as well. So you get fast burial is one key. And then if you have it in a sand deposit, you have where the groundwater can move through, and then the minerals in the groundwater can replace the organic parts of the bone and then turn it basically into a rock. And so those are the better opportunities then to find or to make it turn into a fossil after.
Because that's what it is, right? It's not a bone. It's literally it's like almost a mold of the bone, but it's replaced by mineral. Is that kind of
It's the jaw, but the organic parts in the jaw are replaced by the minerals. So it basically turns it to a rock, turns the bone into more or less a rock.
that's really
And not all of them are that well mineralized. I mean, there's some bones I've collected. The outside of the bone is mineralized slightly, and the inside is just crumbs. And same thing up at Ashfall, which is 12 million years old. The outer portion of the bone is really hard. The inside is really crumbly, and you could basically grind it away with your finger, moving it back and forth. It's that soft in some instances. So, yeah.
So when you talk about fossils and they're ancient, they're very old, like millions of years old. Why should we study them? Why is that?
Well, they give us a lot of evidence about the Earth's past. So, we can learn about past habitats, past climates, what the landscape was like, how it was set up. If you're on a high or a low, you can learn about, immigration events, which we use frequently. We know bison came over from Asia, maybe 250,000 years ago. Those are a common part of the Pleistocene portion. And so, they may have reached the Great Plains around 200,000 years ago or so. We can learn about extinctions by looking at things. We can see how animals interact with each other. So there may have been one predator that preyed on a certain item in the past. So there's lots of information that we can learn about that. We can learn about past climates and see if the modern day things we're seeing are typical of what's happened in the past, or is this an accelerated climate change because of humans? We can see how humans interacted with things right at the end of the ice age. So there's a lot of interesting questions to be answered about that we can get from fossils.
Yeah. And I was actually thinking a lot about this today because I'm working on a bird program that I'm going to give later. And what I was reading, whenever I learn about a subject, I can't help but go all the way back. And it's actually a problem sometimes because then I spend a lot of time. But I was going back to like the evolution of birds and how they realized that birds are living dinosaurs. And so my thought on that is, what else can we learn from fossils? We almost can like use fossils to learn about modern day animals as well, their origins and maybe, what they have in common and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we can see the whole evolutionary history of families, both some that go extinct and some that are still around. We can see, like, just for example, since I study microfossils many times, I look at moles, and you can see going from like 6 to 7 to 8 or forward 8, 7, 6. You can see the different evolutionary changes in the teeth, like getting higher crowned, adding cement onto the surface, changes in body size. So you can see that change in different species from these 1 million year time frames. So
kind of like if you had a huge book of life in fossils, like you're reading the first chapters.
Yeah.
And then
absolutely.
That's so neat. And I don't know about you, but I can never look at turkeys the same. Like I just see dinosaurs.
Right? Yeah. I do have to say, I once saw a pheasant, crossing the road up by Ord, actually, right after we had talked Shane. And for some reason, the first thing in my head, I was like, Velociraptor,
Yeah.
and ran across the road, just like that,
Just like that, yeah.
And then I was like, oh my gosh, Monica, that was glad no one else was in the car.
No,
when I
that's
said
okay.
that, so,
Like
yeah.
I wish I would have been. We could have nerded out.
Yeah.
About it.
So, like, speaking of dinosaurs, what is our that's usually what I think of when I think of fossils. I think of dinosaur tracks and dinosaur bones.
Every 5-year-old knows
Yeah.
all the dinosaurs.
Yeah. Is that like the fossils that we would find in Nebraska, or like was everything a dinosaur? What do we find?
Yeah, you're gonna be disappointed. So in our collection here at the museum, we have over 1.5 million vertebrate fossils, and we only have 2 dinosaur fossils. And I'm gonna show you one of these right here tonight. So this is a cast of one, the actual tooth. This is a little tyrannosaur tooth, or part of a tyrannosaur tooth, that was actually found by an 8-year-old boy in 1981. And it's one of 2 fossils of dinosaurs. In order to be a dinosaur, it needed to live on land. And the majority of the rock layers we have during the Mesozoic era, at least at the end of the Mesozoic era at the surface, are all sea deposits when there was this shallow seaway covering Nebraska between 70 and more or less 100 million years ago. And so in there, we find things that are just as cool as dinosaurs. They're just as big as dinosaurs. One thing I have here to show you tonight is this is part of a lower jaw from an animal called a mosasaur, which is a marine reptile which lived in that seaway. And this guy
Of course, is not a dinosaur. We can just put
correct. Yep. So dinosaurs need to be on land. They need to have their legs underneath their body. This guy had flippers, looked more eel-like, maybe like with an alligator head on more like an eel body. So we have a picture of one of those in one of the slides we can pull up. But this was actually found by a couple of Game and Parks employees on a road cut in Niobrara State Park. And so this is about 70 million years old. So with my job, I have to go out and follow behind the machines. Sometimes we're digging, looking, screening for microfossils, the jaws of things rabbit size and smaller. If we find things, we'll sit and dig around it. This was a bison collected near, Arnold from a few years ago. We were out in December until the frost was, in the ground. We couldn't dig anymore. We got partial skeleton. And let's see what the next one. I'm gonna skip that one for now. There's your mosasaur. So the skull is probably about 2.5 feet in length. This is on display at Morrill Hall. This guy probably was somewhere between 25 and 30 feet long. There's still lots of debate. This was one of the top predators in the ocean 70 million years ago. There's some debate whether these guys are more closely related to snakes or something like a Komodo dragon or something like that.
Okay, I'm thinking. So I'm a nerd of all sorts, I guess, and I'm really thinking about physics a lot lately. I apologize. I know you've been hearing me talk about physics, but the first thing I'm thinking is, what was the bite force on that thing? That's insane.
Yeah. And there's another big marine reptile living at that time called a plesiosaur. Long-necked plesiosaurs look like the Loch Ness monster. What we see in the fossil record is plesiosaur diversity drops off once these guys evolve. So we know these were out-competing plesiosaurs, and these guys probably ate whatever they want. There's some motion in the skull, between the bones in the skull, so they can eat things larger, kind of like a snake does.
I was just gonna say, is it kind of like they could extend their jaw like snakes? And is that what the debate is there?
Have some bear belt.
Oh my God, here we go.
Sorry, we're not talking about snakes.
All right.
But yeah, I would not, if we were getting a time machine, I would not want to go back and snorkel in these seaways for sure. You wouldn't last very long with these guys around. So
that gives me the chills and like the coolest.
And earlier we were talking about Jurassic Park, and I was like, do you know what a mosasaur is? And I know you said you haven't seen it, but this is not what it looks like in the movie. This looks kind of scary.
Can I just say that we've known that dinosaurs have had feathers for how long now, and you're still not representing that? I think it's.
Can we please normalize that?
Can we normalize feathers? Representation of feathers? So Jurassic Park as science versus entertainment. Maybe at the very least it gets people excited about the past, and then they can go and unlearn some stuff.
That's exactly right. Yep.
That's really cool. So like Nebraska, we didn't have dinosaurs. Obviously, we had a lot of really cool animals.
Yeah. So marine.
Take us back in time for some of those mammals.
Yeah, you're right. So mammals is predominantly what we have, those rock layers exposed at the surface over the majority of the state, 2/3 of the state, actually more than that, because it's over top of those layers of rock that have the marine reptiles in it. But you know, one mammal that I love is this guy. This is a sabertooth right here.
Whoa.
Look at
This
that.
is the only skull of this known. This is a cast of it because the actual skull is in a safe or in a locked room on our floor here. But this is a lion-sized, you know, saber cat-like carnivore. It's a completely extinct group, has this large saber on the front. This would have lived around 8 million years ago. If we don't have a full skeleton, but from the leg, we have the shin bone, and the shin matches up more so with like a jaguar versus cheetah. So we know this was more of an ambush predator that probably jumped out, opened its mouth, and sliced at whatever prey.
My question, because I know it takes energy for animals to, you know, evolve their form for their function. So sorry, my brain's going a million miles an hour. Sorry, Monica. But what kind of evolutionary pressure would allow evolving something so long like that to be advantageous? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And you know, it's something that it's not, there's lots of saber cat development or saber tooth development in a lot of different lineages. There's this extinct group. There's felids like you find out at La Brea, tar pits, the Smilodon. There's marsupials that have evolved saber tooth sort of nature. I'll hold this one up here. There's actually a enlarged canine on a deer. So this is a plant eater. So I mean, it could be from hunting to protection to, and these guys, they're hornless, so they're using them probably like in the modern musk deer, probably as antlers to fight the other males for breeding. So they're using those.
Were saber-tooths just in vogue back then or something? Like, were they more prevalent for some reason?
It goes and then it goes extinct, and then something else like, oh, this is a good idea, and then they go extinct, and yeah, you know.
That is really cool.
And
yeah,
if kind of, oh, sorry, that
no, I was gonna say you might over evolve and then it's not beneficial anymore, or
like, retreat, come back, too much. I can't brush my teeth properly.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And if you visit the 4th floor in Morrill Hall, they have that on a machine, right, where you can like crank it and you can show. Yeah, it shows like the range of motion that thing had. That is really cool.
Yeah, I think you can it could open its mouth 115 degrees before it would start to disarticulate the jaws. So yeah, that's one of the only, I mean, that's really cool. That's on my, you know, if I had a bucket list of things to find before I retire, that would be one, but the chances of that are probably pretty slim. There's one time frame where that largest one occurs, and there's not very many spots where there's that rock layer.
So when you talk about these spots, like in Nebraska, are there hot spots that you would like, yes, you'd probably find a fossil here. Like you mentioned, 90 out of 93 counties have found. Yeah, what's with those other 3? Are those just not hot spots? You just simply haven't found one yet.
Right. So 2 of the counties are Grant and Arthur. So they have sand dunes on top, and the sand dunes are younger than 10,000 years. So you could find bison in there potentially. I mean, we haven't. But the other one is Wayne County, and I have no idea. All the counties around Wayne have it. The rock layers are there. I've had road projects up there. I just have not found any bones. So, so it's kind of weird. But I mean, they're distributed across the state. Different rock layers and timeframes are distributed differently. So you would go to different spots of the state to look for different ages of fossils. Like if I wanted to look for 290 million year old lungfish, I'd go to the southeast corner of the state, maybe down around Indian Cave. If I want to look for you know, dinosaurs potentially, I'd go look maybe out like by Pioneers Park in the Dakota formation. If I wanted to go,
you have plans on Saturday? Let's go do that.
All right, sounds good.
You know, if you want to go look at the marine reptiles and fish and things like that, you could go up to Lewis and Clark Lake area and look at those 70 to 82 million year old or 87 million year old rock layers up there. And then
I feel like
ice age things are everywhere. You know, you could find one literally, you know, in your backyard. There was a part of a mammoth that was found a block away from Morrill Hall when they put in a furnace back in, I think, the 1930s. So in literally anywhere, there are spots. Fortunately for us, there's a lot of spots where state parks or federal lands have them protected so that everybody can enjoy them and preserve those rock layers for us. For us to go to some of those places, we do have to fill out permits to collect on federal land as well, and say that we're going to take them back here to the museum to curate them and allow them to be used for science. So
I love that. I love this picture you're painting where like you can go to this park to see this, prehistoric fossil and all these things. Just like, because right now I feel like our job is you can go here to see birds and you can go here to see, some cool creatures.
Yeah,
from
it's the
modern
same
day.
fossil.
Yeah, how
Yeah.
cool is that? And that makes me kind of think, are there any animals that we see in Nebraska today that have direct lineages to some of these incredible prehistoric creatures that were here millions of years ago?
yeah, and just one example, about 6 million years ago, we see our first, well, it'd be an ancestor to the coyote. And we see that in the fossil record here, a thing called Eucyon davisi. And so, we have a skull from northeast Nebraska, which is one of the better ones that's known from the state, to document that. We see ancestors of badgers here in the fossil record. Yeah, so, I mean, I'm kind of biased towards carnivores. I studied carnivores for my master's degree, but there's things like mice as well, ancestors to voles that we see at 1 million years, and then they go into Microtus or whatever. So there's lots and lots of evidence of these, especially as you're getting closer in the Ice Age portion. You're seeing those closer relatives, but at the same time, you can go back in and look at, horses, for example, and you can see horses, what they look like 36 million years ago, and you can see how they changed at 18 million years. Something changed and they started doing different things with their teeth, and then started to lose side toes, etc. Ashfall's a good place to see that, and eventually going extinct at the end of the Ice Age around 12,000 years ago.
That's what I was going to mention. One of the coolest facts I feel like I've learned, and I learned it from him, is that, and speak to this, Shane, though, because maybe I forgot it over the years, is that it's really ironic that, isn't it, horses and rhinos and camels evolved here in North America. Is that correct? And at least, and they went extinct here, but then we brought horses back somehow. So, can you speak to that? That's kind of an interesting, like,
yeah,
for sure. Originally here, but then, had a fun journey.
For sure, yeah, and then like the camels, for sure, most of their evolutionary history is documented in the rocks here in Nebraska, and then they go over to Asia. So there's constant migrations between them. Same thing with South America. South America was kind of its own island continent, and then they connected with Central America, and then there was a lot of interchange between those two. And then there's a lot of pressure put on the species that are there. Either they can adapt, or if the other ones that come in outcompete them, then they go extinct. So we see that a lot in the fossil record here. And some things just find a little niche where they're very good at exploiting the resources, and they're very successful. And possums coming back in, they were here, they go extinct, they come back. Cats were here, they go extinct, then they start coming back in the fossil record. So, I mean, there's constant change in that regard.
So you said that you studied carnivores for your master's degree. So are those kind of your favorite prehistoric creatures?
Yeah.
What's your favorite one?
All of them.
Okay. I know we ask that of every expert, honestly, and they say that, and I know it's like, what's your favorite child?
I mean, you love birds, so if I ask you what your favorite bird is.
I know, but I don't. If you ask me my favorite type of animal, I couldn't answer. That's true. Yeah. Like I like even lichens. So anyways, yeah. All
right. So I like mammals, but I like plesiosaurs. Long-necked plesiosaurs are pretty cool. I mean, if you think about, how big they were, maybe up to 40 feet, a neck with 70 vertebrae in it. That's pretty cool to me. I guess my two that I would probably say are probably my favorite, or one of them would be this guy. You might be able to find a slide in that presentation. This is a thing called a horned rodent, or a mylogolid.
Wow.
And this is one that was living around 6 to 7 million years ago. The males have these extremely tall horns on the end of their nose. It'll be back a little bit further. There you go. And so they're not much. This one is pretty large. It would be a little bit bigger than a prairie dog in overall size, but they have these big claws on their
it's like badger claws.
Yeah. And we know they have burrows. There's been burrows found out in Colorado, or presumed burrows from these. I think we have a burrow up in Ashfall of one of these as well. And so they probably lived underground, very similar to like a prairie dog would have.
Shane, are these any close related to that? What is it? The Demonellic that made that super cool corkscrew out in agate?
Yeah, so they're not. So the ones that make the demon helix out at agate are actually a beaver, and this is its own family that goes extinct about 5 million years ago. So 5 million years ago, lots of things go extinct in North America, like rhinoceros go extinct. These guys, there's some other deer-like things that go extinct.
What happened 5 million years ago? Do we know?
Yeah, that's a good question. Big giant tortoises are less rare. I think there's a change in vegetation, and then I also think there's like a climate change where if we're not seeing the giant tortoises anymore, we're probably experiencing our first winters.
Okay.
Or at least prolonged temperature where it might kill off these big giant Galapagos-like tortoises that were pretty common in the fall.
They were here in Nebraska?
Yeah, we see giant tortoises.
My gosh, I had no idea. That's so cool. No. Oh my God, we had to talk about that.
Yeah. So my other favorite thing, I'll just go on with this guy. This is a slingshot horned deer. This is one I found out in 2005 out in the Wildcat Hills off of that road project. And this is the only one we've ever found in Nebraska, skull of. And so has a horn over each eye, and then the horn on the end of its nose. And sad to admit, but I found this like 3 days before I actually realized what it was. I saw the horn in side view and I thought it was a rib based on the curve. And it was like, oh, we're wrapping up. I got to get this out of the ground. So I was digging around it and I kept digging. I was like, wait, this is connecting. What's going on with this rib? And then I got back to the eye orbit and I was like, oh my God, this is this thing that I've been wanting to find.
No way.
Yeah. And so that was the only time I've had to quit digging because I was so anxious and nervous. My hands were shaking. I had to go away from the dig for a while. So I didn't destroy it because it was one of those once in a lifetime sort of discoveries.
Fascinating. So. And is that the only specimen you said that's been found in Nebraska?
Yeah, the only one found in Nebraska of this particular skull from this particular time frame. They find them down in Texas and Florida along the Gulf Coast in a slightly younger layer of rock. But at this 20 million year time frame, this is it that we have in the collection.
And you can only tell so much from fossils. I know it's almost like you're an ecologist of the past, so you can make a lot of cool presumptions about the biology and life history of these creatures. But is there any way to say with certainty that they didn't somehow use that as a slingshot? Because that looks really What was it?
I don't think it probably was, but it'd be cool. I always think about little rabbits being in front of them as
oh man,
toss them in the air, give them a little
that should be a t-shirt or something. But
yeah.
So you mentioned earlier, like you found like fossilized quotes there, fossilized burrows of animals. So fossils, to my understanding, then are not just I found a bone, that's a fossil. It could be a burrow, it could be poop, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. So everybody thinks of when they find a fossil, it has to be like a body fossil. So teeth or bones, things like that, jaws, like I've been showing you. But there's things like trace fossils, like footprints, impressions, bite marks on bones, that tells us there was evidence of life there, but it didn't leave anything behind. Now, except like the track or whatever. But this particular case, this is a coprolite. So this is fossil poop from a carnivore 32 to 36 million years ago. And in this particular case, usually the carnivore ones are preserved rather than the herbivores because there's bones inside them. So this animal was eating it. And in this particular one, if you look, you won't be able to see it this way through the zoom, but right here, on the end here, there's a little bit of green, and that's actually a piece of bone that's in there. And we can actually prepare these things. We just on campus, there's a new CT scanning machine. So I'm going to take a few of them to go get CT scanned from the ashfall site and see what we see in there. If there's bone chips, we know they were scavenging some of the rhino carcasses up there because we could see the leg bones pulled off one individual and dropped on the face of the other. We see burrows, we see the coprolites, we see maybe vomit. Where it's just
really vomit? Would vomit be a coprolite or is that a different name? Sorry, I just got really excited.
I don't know. I called those like vomitites, but I don't know. Or maybe a regurgitate or something like that.
So I have a strange nerdy thing. Ever since I learned what the word coprolite meant, like I swear when I was maybe 8 or 9, because nerd for life, Yep. I have It's like a secret dream of mine. Did I ever tell you the secret? I've always wanted to find a copper light. So every time I've been like frolicking in rivers and stuff, and then like I see like funky looking rocks, I'm like, could this be the copper light? I don't know, like where would you even find copper? Maybe like it's by those kind of
there's places where they're everywhere. Once you know what
but
they
how do you
look
know
like,
it's a copper light and not just a bumpy rock? That's
bumpy rock. Yeah, very good, very good. Yeah. So, in most instances, it basically looks just like what you have to pick up in your yard. There's gas pockets. It basically looks like a fossil turd, for lack of a better word. So, so yeah, absolutely. They look just like that. The rocks and minerals that form concretions usually have more of a smooth shape. And so, they're really easy to pick out. And there's certain rock layers where you just walk around. If there's a lot of erosion, they're there. Now, you're not going to find them in an ancient river deposit, more than likely, where it's sandy. You're probably going to find them in a silt or something like that, where it might be a fossil soil horizon or something.
This is a horrible transition for this question, so I apologize to anyone who's eating dinner. However, I have heard, actually, you taught me to figure out if something is a fossil or a rock, you lick it. And I've been licking rocks ever since.
She came in one morning and was like, I was licking rocks, and like all of the coworkers just kind of looked at her.
But if it sticks on your tongue, there's science. Shane, back me up. There's science behind
it. There's a little bit to that. All right. So with that, if it's something that has a lot, if it's still like a Pleistocene thing where it's not fully mineralized, it will. And on tusks of like mammoths or gomphotheres or something usually get some.
Tell me that discllor, Shane, and I've been licking rocks.
She probably likes like 40.
But I mean, yeah. So we can, as geologists, we also sometimes will chew on rocks and just see how much silt or clay content is in a rock, and so things like that, how gritty it is, so we know which rock layer we might be in, things like that. So
that's very cool.
I've licked my share of rocks.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, well, she's licked them, you've eaten them. It's all right. So like, speaking of like when you're out in the field and stuff like that, how do you know like where to look for fossils? Like you said when there's construction sites and stuff like that, they have to stop the project and you can like take a look around. But what does that process look like? I know like you don't carry a metal detector and it beeps when you see a fossil. I mean, maybe there is that, I don't know. But how do you find them?
Yeah, find them. It's a lot of just walking. You're looking for areas of erosion, which rock layers are exposed in different portions of the state. One thing that's unfortunate for Nebraska, we have a great fossil record, but if you think of Nebraska versus like Utah, there's rock exposure everywhere in Utah because of the more arid climate. Here we have row crops or pasture land that obscure things. We have more moisture, and so everything grasses over really quickly, including road cuts. So those are kind of things that get trapped and hidden forever. And so you look for things like big floods are horrible for infrastructure, like we had a couple of years ago. Lots of people lost livestock, etc. But then it also opens up lots of areas where fossils may have eroded out. So we usually go find areas of high erosion and look in those places. We know which rock layers are exposed in certain portions of the state, so we know which time frame we're looking at. And so yeah, that's kind of all the learning process is learning the geology all across the state. And then a lot of times it's not just us going out looking for things. It's the ranchers, it's the farmers that are out fixing a fence line and notice this bone sticking out of this bank, and then they contact us at the museum to come have a look at it. And sometimes it might be a rock, and other times, it might be a full jaw of an elephant. So our collections are based, majority of them are on fossils that came from private property, and those people allowed the museum to go in and collect them and bring them back here so they could be housed for research. And we have researchers from all over the world that come in to use these fossils as research tools or data points. And so yeah, it's a difficult question, but I would just tell anybody, my eyes are on the ground more than they're up. So it'd be easy to walk into a tree most times with your eyes down, but yeah, just go out and look, and have a good time in that.
So see, now you need to stop looking for birds.
No,
You
okay,
need to
but
look
during
down.
the summer I'm looking up and I'm looking down for bugs,
Okay.
and now I'm gonna look down for fossils and sideways for fossils.
Yeah.
There's too many ways. Anyway,
So we talked earlier about like Jurassic Park, and I promise I won't bring up Mosasaurus again. But like when I think of like excavating a fossil, I think of that opening scene in Jurassic Park. Yeah, like thank you. And
the
he's
brush.
sitting there with the brushes. Is
and
that
the
what
hat. You have to have the hat.
The
first
hat.
of all.
Yeah. Yep. Is that what it's actually like, or is you're like
Yeah, it is in some
Okay.
instances. You know, it's not it depends on the rock layer. I mean, there's some that are as soft that you can just use a paintbrush and just brush the sand away if it's loose sand. There's others that are extremely hard and you have to use a chisel
Yep.
and a hammer to get around. And you know, those aren't as fun to dig in, but the fossils are usually better preserved in some of those harder rock layers. Because you know, we use little mini like air jackhammers in the lab to remove all that rock fairly quickly. But you know, in the field, it's painstaking work. There's usually bloody knuckles, and after we dig, we kind of isolate the fossil. If it's there in the middle, we kind of dig a moat around the fossil and make an island, and then we'll cover up the fossil in the rock with wet toilet paper or wet paper towels, tamp it down with a brush to get all the air pockets out, and then we'll encase it in pieces of burlap that are dipped in plaster of Paris to make a hard outer shell and let it sit there in the sun for a couple hours. Most important part of all the field excavating part is the data. If you don't have any data with it, and it's kind of a useless specimen, you lose all the scientific data as soon as you pull it out of the ground. So you make notes as to which rock layer it came from. If there's some layer of rock it's below. There's lots of times where we can go back to field notes from the 1930s and it'll lead us right to that point. They didn't have GPS points or anything like that, but we can go find those fossil sites, and maybe the rock layer names have changed. We can update that. You know, we always tell people that find things, just make a note or take some photos of where it came from, because we can always go back to that point. We as scientists can get the data if it's something that's extremely important that they want to donate. But if you just say, oh, it came out of this river, that does us no good. We don't
Right.
know.
Because where does it fall in that timeline of life? What happens then, Shane? You mentioned, and then you kind of case it and stuff. And then when you take it back to the lab, and I know you are associated with Morrill Hall, which is one of my favorite places, by the way. Yeah, like in Nebraska. But yeah, what happens then when you get so you have your amazing fossil and you get it to the lab? What happens then?
We'll use brushes and little X-Acto blades, and we'll just slowly dig down. Biologic probes we can use quite a bit. And then if the fossil is really broken up, we can put some chemicals on it, some plastic beads that are dissolved in acetone, and that'll help hold that together. And then if we want to, we can glue individual pieces back together. If you have a bone that has two broken ends, in highway construction, inevitably there's going to be something that gets broken. And so we can just take those pieces and glue them back together. And then afterwards we'll label it. It'll go into one of our collection rooms like I'm in right now. This is the Ashfall collection room, where all the specimens from Ashfall that were collected prior to it becoming a state park are housed. And it'll go into one of the collection rooms and the storage cabinets. And then they can be used by students, curators, staff. We use them all the time for identifying things. You would think with 1.5 million fossils, we'd have one of everything, every single bone of every single animal. But like we said before, very few bones become fossils. And so there's always times where it's like, man, I can't find this, especially like with birds. I wish I had this bone. I know it's a bird. What is it? I have no idea. It looks closest to modern day turkeys, so it's probably some fossil species related to a turkey. So, you know, those are the things. It's basically, our collection is basically the Library of Nebraska's past.
That's cool.
That is really neat.
I was just thinking.
So looking at this and talking about all these cool things that you found, what's been like the coolest thing that you've found in the field? Like best field moment ever? Was it that slingshot deer? Or?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
For sure. It's exciting. You know, you don't know it at the time. When you're screening for microfossils, you just throw sand onto these window screens, and then you take all the gravel and you bring it back to the lab. And then when you're sorting it underneath the microscope, you'll find teeth and you'll be like, oh my gosh, this is a new species of mole. You'll figure things out. So those are exciting too, but it's not the in the moment excitement.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean, everything is exciting. You know, I probably get a little less excited now that I've been doing it 25 years from when I first was there, but every time you uncover something, you're the first human to see it. And
Yeah,
so,
That's a cool way to think
that.
about that.
Whoa.
Yeah.
you know, so you're connected to that forever. So your name will be on the tag that you found it. And so those are kind of the cool things. And then you know, when it's something new, you know, that's even more exciting. But even like with you know, a couple of years ago we found a bison. There's lots of bison out there that we've collected,
Mhm.
but you know, the whole skeleton might be laid out there. You might find other evidence, maybe human involvement with it because humans were around when the bison were around. Things like that. So there's a whole story that each fossil is unique, has its own story. You might find a leg bone, for instance, of a lion that lived 6 million years ago, but then you see bite marks on the end, and then you can pick it up and you can see that that tooth on this bone crushing dog fits perfectly into that hole on the end of the bone. And the part that's missing was actually chewed off by that bone crushing dog. So it's kind of like a combination of discovery and then kind of like CSI to reconstruct the crime scene as you may, right? What happened out there to get these bones buried and what happened to them prior to them being buried. So it's, you know, it's extremely exciting to do the research and find out all those things. And then exciting to see if it does get published as a new species.
I think I thought this last time too. I think I might be changing my career soon. Absolutely fantastic.
So you're talking about finding all these fossils, and I know you said earlier you have to have a permit if you go to a certain location. I know that Toadstool Geologic Park is like a hotspot, favorite place of both of us, and but also a hotspot to find a lot of different fossils. So I'm going to be going there in October. If I like take a look around and I find one, can I take that with me, or do I have to have a permit, or what is like the rule or not rule about taking fossils that you find on the ground?
Sure, absolutely. So, you know, with a lot of public lands, especially with all the federal lands, there's a paleontological protection law in place. So those have to stay there. That's why we fill out the permits. And not everybody can get a permit to excavate it. You have to demonstrate that you're a repository and there's some scientific research item that you're going to use to collect that. So definitely a no-no to just go pick up and take things from there. Game and parks for their wildlife management area and some of the state parks also have protections in place to keep those for the public rather than somebody taking it and putting it into their dresser drawer will never be seen again. It could be a one-of-a-kind thing like the slingshot horned deer that could potentially be a new species that we didn't know about before. And so, yeah, it's probably best that way. If it's on private property, you can do whatever you want with it. If you want to excavate it, something like that. But
what would you recommend if I owned a lot of land and I saw something you said just?
Yeah, you can do if it's on private property. You know, somebody can go in there and you get permission from the landowner and excavate it and keep it if you want. If you find something and you want to donate it to the museum, you can contact us. But for us, we would have to go to the landowner because they're technically the one that owns that fossil and have them sign off on a donation form. So, you know, things like that.
I think it's so cool though. You said, especially with Nebraska being 97% or more, maybe privately owned. It's so cool how you said so much of that collection was, landowners seeing this and being excited enough not to like put it on their shelf and stuff, but like to share it really with like our existing knowledge of life. Like when he said, it's a library.
Yeah, like you really rely on landowners and just the general public to help out with finding fossils as well. That's really neat.
For sure. And because there's not a ton of paleontology jobs, there's 4 or 5 of us. A couple of us do research, going out looking for fossils, excavating. And if you think about the number of eyes on the ground with us, we're going to a certain spot to look for a certain thing, or in my instance, I'm just following road construction projects. So I'm very limited of the total acres that are out there to look at. But there's lots of you guys that go out and enjoy, canoeing down a river, or, people that actually have to work and go, put a new fence post hole in. And so they're actively digging on their property or need gravel for their driveway. And they'll dig in, and here's this thing that looks like a human head sticking out of the bank. And then you dig back in, and it's a leg bone from a stegomastodon, and you have the whole skeleton more or less there. So it's great when those people find things and contact the museum, and then it comes in here and it'll be here forever. They can come in and see it anytime they want. It's available for researchers to answer their research questions and for the public. So we can bring these things out here tonight to show you guys, a little bit about Nebraska's past as well. So
and that makes me think, and I just love that. But why do you think it's so important? Why should people care about the past creatures and fossils and all the amazing things that you get to study and see and share with people?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of part of our natural heritage for one, right? All the information that's there, if a fossil gets destroyed and breaks up into a million pieces, that's it, it's gone. And so we've lost kind of that data point. I like to think of them kind of like pieces in a jigsaw puzzle, right? And at times you might have a picture, you might have, oh, it's like the sky, I don't know what's going on here, I have a few pieces in the bottom, there's some grasses here. But that's what fossils are, and then the plant fossils tie it in, and then we get this really clear picture of, hey, this is what Western Nebraska looked like 20 million years ago. We know now from that ancient river deposit that there was a river that was probably at least 20 feet deep flowing through there, when we previously thought it was this very arid time frame. And so this is where that slingshot horned deer has to be in areas where it's a moisture climate. And so we can see things like that answer these questions we don't knew the answer to prior, by adding these extra data points or puzzle pieces, as you will, to the whole thing. So it's something where the more we know, the more we can make inferences to climates in the future, things like that. We know more about maybe where this particular species came from, how it evolved over a long period of time. So
it's really connecting us, to a greater understanding of what it means to even walk on this earth.
Yeah.
Not to get philosophical.
No.
But how cool
true.
is that?
Yeah.
We're walking like through Nebraska, and we're sharing that. We're not sharing the time, but we're sharing this like land that was shared with all these fantastic creatures. It blows my mind.
So for any of us especially, I'm asking for us mostly.
Yeah. For a friend.
Us fossil nerders, where would you send us to go find some more information about fossils? Like, would we check out just Moral Hall's website or State Museum's website? Where would you send us?
Yeah, I would say, go to Moral Hall for one. That's the state's natural history collection or museum. So that's a great place to start. There's lots of other, places that are like our partner museums, Ashfall Fossil Beds, Trailside Museum out of Fort Robinson, talks about Nebraska's past. We partner a lot with, Game and Parks with programming. We also work a lot with the National Park Service to help them. So Agate Fossil Beds would be a place to look, Then there's, these great books that Game and Parks have put out. This was out in 1994. This thing's called Cellars of Time. I think you can buy these up at Ashfall Fossil Beds. And this has tons of pictures. It talks about all the different time frames we have fossils from. If you're interested in artifacts, has arrowheads and talks about that. So it's paleontology and archaeology. But if you're into more specific sites, like there's books on Ashfall Fossil Beds. There's a new book that just came out for middle school age kids about Ashfall and some of the information we know.
Is that Rhinos of Nebraska book?
Yeah, Rhinos of
Nebraska.
Yep.
I gotta get a copy.
So there's lots of resources like that. It'd always be a good thing to be, a friend on Facebook of the museum, because then events like this, where we have like maybe a Facebook Live event about a certain topic, you can learn more about that. The fourth floor of Moral Hall has a visible prep lab. So if you're interested in how these fossils are taken out of the rock, we man that Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday during the daytime, and then Sunday afternoons, there's somebody up there as well. And then there's opportunities if you want to volunteer. We have an active volunteer program here at the museum where we can pair up your skills with what you want to do, whether it's prepare fossils or help in the collections, or help convey the educational materials that we've gotten from the fossils to the public. There's always those opportunities as well. So
Shane, let me ask you this, especially for any like younger people in the audience or in general who are so interested in paleontology, what what do you think is, the next, like, kind of almost frontier of paleontology, the next 10 or 20 years or something like that? Like, what would be super exciting to find? Or is there like some kind of body of knowledge that you're circling and you haven't got there yet because you're waiting on to find a cool, like, missing piece? I don't know what this question is doing, but I just
there's so many things out there. There's so much we still don't know. We think
Right.
we know a lot, and it's constant new discoveries. And some things may have been collected 100 years ago, but they're in a collection drawer, and it takes that specific person to open the drawer and say, "Oh my gosh, you called this a bear dog? It's actually not. It's something else. It's even more cool." So,
right.
there's things like that that happen all the time with technology and CT scanning. We could run a block of rock through a CT scanner, and we can basically digitally prepare away the rock, and you can see what fossils are in it to know if it's worth physically cleaning them up manually. And so 3D printing is out there now. We can do surface scans of them, so we can make casts that we can use in hands-on programming exhibits. We can give them to the people that donated the fossils, things like that. So there's a lot with technology, and it's constantly, science constantly advances, and there's new things that somebody that didn't have the opportunity to do 25 years because technology wasn't there is capable of doing in the future. So
I just had the weirdest image in my mind, and I'm sorry, but will someone talk to me when we can get like a hologram of like a walking mammoth down the hallway or something like that? Wouldn't that be amazing?
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Or can we go, like, we talked about Jurassic Park and how everyone loves dinosaurs. When are we gonna get what did you say, like a Pleistocene park? Like, can we get that going where we can highlight those amazing prehistoric mammals and things like that?
Like a Jurassic Park, like a sexy Jurassic Park, but that's very scientifically accurate.
Yes, can we be scientifically accurate? And so we're not talking about Ice Age.
It's a great movie,
It's a
but
good
I'm
one.
sure it's not very accurate.
Right. Yeah, I think a Pleistocene park would be pretty cool to have those camels roaming around along with like a short-faced bear that stands on all fours and looks you in the eye and stands to reach 12 feet tall. I mean, there's things like that. That'd be fun. And I know they've been trying to figure out how to clone a mammoth or whatever with modern elephant and things like that. It may work. It's not going to be a full 100% mammoth, so it's kind of kind of a hybrid sort of thing. I mean, those things potentially could happen in the future, but as the climate changes now are being driven and the permafrost is melting, I think we're going to learn a lot more about those Pleistocene animals, because we're going to see these mummified carcasses of things like there was a baby wolf a couple years ago that came out of some of these things up in the Yukon.
And that baby woolly rhino or something, I remember.
Yeah. And so there's constant things in the Ice Age. Those are going to have still preserved DNA. It might not be the full sequence, but those are things that potentially could happen in the future. We just took people up to space today, right? And
that's
last
true.
week. So those are things that never seemed possible, for the general public, in the 1960s. So science will keep advancing, paleontology will keep advancing. The kids are getting smarter and smarter. So they'll come and take the foundation that was laid by the previous generation and just keep advancing it. So
I love that.
one thing I would like, and if somebody can figure out how to make a ground penetrating radar that we can see the fossils and we can just go to an outcrop and drag it over the surface.
That'd be great.
And we can know exactly where to dig.
Put that on your to-do.
We'll work on that.
Yeah.
Well, this was really cool, Shane. I learned quite a bit, and I think Amber did too. And it sounds like we've had a few private messages that people are really excited and want to volunteer. So for those of you that are still on tonight, let's give a big round of applause to Shane. So thank you very much. That was really good. I think people really enjoyed it. So what we're going to do for all of you guys out there is tomorrow, Amber and I will do a follow-up email. Shane mentioned a lot of cool resources and places to go. We will go ahead and put that in our email along with an evaluation about how much you liked our program tonight. So if you're frantically trying to write stuff down or you don't remember, we will send that for you tomorrow.
All about the resources.
And I do want to share one more thing with all of us tonight as well. Our next Nature Nerd Night, Amber, guess what we're talking about? It is.
Okay.
We're excited about all these, but next month, not next week, next month, August 17th, we're going to be talking about musky mustelids. What are mustelids?
Just like one of the coolest mammal groups that ever existed. And apparently, okay, sorry. the weasel family and badgers and wolverines and things like that. But apparently now we know there's prehistoric badgers.
Yeah,
We need to add that to the mix.
Yeah,
So
our
exciting.
zoologist, Sean Dunn from Game and Parks, is going to talk to us about it. He has done a lot of work with mustelids in North America and out of North America, so he's going to talk to us about that. And then we also have one in September, October, and November. So we have 4 of them left. They're going to be the third Tuesday of every month, 7 to 8 p.m. on Zoom. They each do have an individual registration link, and we will send you the one for August in our email tomorrow as well. We did some questions, but I'm sure that you guys are gonna, sleep on this and think about more questions.
Yeah.
Shane, would you be okay if we gave them your contact information for questions, or if there's someone else that could answer them as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And if you have some fossils for identification that you found over the years, you don't know what it is, send some pictures along too. So
Shane,
yeah.
as soon as I find that coprolite, I will let you know.
All right.
And yeah, I actually have emailed Shane as well about a horse tooth. So you've
Really?
been very helpful. I was very, very surprised and super excited to find that. So thank you as well. So
Awesome.
awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We hope you have a great rest of your night, and please join us again in August for mustelids.
Thanks for nerding out tonight, everybody, and especially you, Shane. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shane. Thanks everybody.
Thank you. Thanks
See you next
everyone.
time.
Bye.